You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. First Contact keeps you dry for up to 72 hours, and I'm not talking about your armpits. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This week we have been watching Galaxy's Child, with a story by Thomas Kartosian, a telly played by Maurice Hurley, and directed by Winrich Kolbe. So you could say,
these are the words of Maurice Hurley.
James, what happens in this one?
The Enterprise discovers a new life form, some kind of space whale, and everyone gets excited. But when the Enterprise gets too close, it attacks. Forced to fire phasers to protect the ship, the creature is killed. But no one is sad for too long because it turns out that it was pregnant, and the Enterprise delivers the space baby. But it soon hooks onto the ship and drains the power. In the other plot, Geordi meets the designer of the Enterprise's engines, Dr. Leia Brahms. Cold, cerebral, and lacking in humour, First Contact has been running for 8 years.
Very good. 7 on 10.
Well, Alex, you've never seen this episode before. What did you think of it?
Well, and I mean this in every sense of the phrase, what a lot of old wank.
Oh, I hate this episode. I absolutely hate it. I don't think I was so bad when I first watched it, but with my 2020 lenses on, it's like an essay about toxic masculinity in the workplace. It is just, it makes me cringe, it makes me feel ill. I really struggled to watch it. I had to keep on pausing it just because I was like, oh man, Geordi is a horrible creep.
You're right, it does feel like one of those workplace training videos, the sort of thing that should be presented by John Cleese. Well, actually, no, considering John Cleese's recent opinions, he'd probably spend an hour siding with Geordi and then bang on about sovereignty. Yeah, it's a weird mix of the extremely bloody awful and the incredibly depressing. One plot about a toxic man, and then one plot about an intergalactic Caesarean. I come to this programme having recently, because everyone's at home and going through old TV series, having recently decided to watch Jeb Mercurio of Line of Duty and Bodyguard fame, one of his very early TV series, one that was very much forgotten, Bodies.
I remember that.
You remember Bodies? Yeah. So I've spent about 2 weeks going through watching this programme about medical negligence on a gynae ward with child death, botched operations, and lifelong disabilities as a result of medical incompetence. So yeah, this really cheered me. It was nice. It was nice to be reminded of that, having just finished it.
Geordi is completely out of character, though. I mean,
is he?
He's
always been a little creepy.
He's been awkward. I wouldn't say creepy. I'd say awkward. Whereas he is just downright creepy here.
He's the kind of guy that I could imagine after a few Romulan ales would start banging on about the friend zone.
I do think Geordi is somewhat out of character in this, because even that opening scene where he's in the ready room with Picard, and Picard says, Dr. Leia Brahms is coming on board, and then he gets all excited and starts acting really weird, and it's just like, don't do that around the captain. That's just, it's instantly uncomfortable.
He can't tell the difference between dreams and reality.
It's just
he's the chief engineer of the flagship. That's not right.
Have you been studying the diagram there, Geordi? I have, yes, Ted.
Geordi in this episode is basically all the Star Trek fans that go up to the stars and talk to them as if they are the characters, isn't he?
What's your favourite episode? Mine's the one where you were in the cat suit. That was all of them. I know.
My favourite episode's actually the one we've not made yet.
Well, I mean, they were all good in their own way. What was your favourite? It's £10 for a photograph. 5 for your own item signed.
That's quite cheap, actually.
I didn't say which member of the cast it was.
It totally is that, and it's really weird. And then he acts inappropriately when he first meets her. When he's greeting her, he doesn't act formally, and she reacts in a professional sort of manner. And then they're touring, not getting along. She doesn't like his modifications. Okay, then he invites her for dinner, and I just think a professional engagement with someone you've never met before. The entire sequence is just, it's a horrible delusional man, and it just him setting up the romantic atmosphere, having the conversation with the computer about the light levels, and then his discussion about the different music that he wants to put on.
Classical guitar. The ladies love that classical guitar.
Can we talk about his casual clothes? They look outdated for the 1980s. And this was made in the 1990s.
Yeah.
It's just his whole, I've just slipped into something more comfortable. I mean, no wonder she left, though, because that's not a good situation. It's not a comfortable situation to put anyone into. Imagine you met someone who'd come to your workplace that day, and then you were like, come to my home. I'm here. You're here alone, just with me, and I've brought the Spanish guitar music out.
Oh, and look, my penis has just inadvertently flopped out. But I've read in your file you might quite like that.
But I don't really understand how we're meant to feel about this. Because to me, it comes across, obviously, you have the chat with Guinan, where she doesn't meet your expectations. She's not who you thought she was. And okay, fine, but I do feel at the end of that scene we're meant to be feeling sympathetic towards Geordie.
There is something about 80s and 90s TV and movies where the idea of a man manipulating you is somehow a romantic gesture. Let's take Groundhog Day for an example. Great film, classic film, little bit creepy. You could argue that Bill Murray is doing that out of boredom over centuries, but does it make it right? I don't know. The most recent series of The Twilight Zone under Jordan Peele has an episode that sort of takes that Groundhog Day idea a bit further, with the idea that there's a man manipulating a woman into going on a date with him by having it's a time loop affair, and uses each time to research her, basically, and that is played as incredibly creepy, and it's definitely on her side, not his, and it is in stark contrast to this. You wouldn't make this today. Well, I mean, if you did, it would be on a channel like London Live in a double bill with a programme about lizards.
But if this did go out today, this is an honest question. Would Geordie be cancelled?
I mean, let's not get into the debate about whether someone can be cancelled or not. But I would say you would definitely label Geordie as at the very least needing to go on some sensitivity training.
He almost comes across as like Data in not understanding human relationships.
But it's just so inappropriate. It's obviously this brilliant scientist who's an expert in her field, and all he's seeing her as is romantic material, and just all these lines, like when she says she doesn't really get along with many people, and she's like, maybe you've not met the right people, and it just him saying, "I was hoping we could be friends," and the implication is not that. It feels like a very strange extrapolation from it. Although there is an element of a comeuppance with the holodeck program, it's all so resolved.
No, that's the point where it goes wrong for me.
No, I mean it does. It does go wrong.
We will get there.
But it's supposed to, like, he's obviously ashamed of it, and he's obviously embarrassed by it, and don't show her that, and then it's, then the discussion. I mean, what's her line? I feel violated, and she's so much in the right. She's so much in the right, and she gets to give the speech which tells Georgie where he is, and then
the line which really surprised me was it good for you?
Yeah. You can tell this script has been written by a man.
But it is that thing, though, because basically the hologram version of her is saying, every time you touch the engines, you're inside me, sort of thing. It's just... But... I mean, going right back to the origins of this with the episode Booby Trap, Geordie, was sort of creepy in that, but it wasn't... He didn't go out of the way to create that program. He didn't say, "Computer, make me a woman." It was the computer created something that would effectively communicate with Geordie. And the thing that can effectively communicate with Geordie is just so tragic. His idea of what a woman should be. And so it wasn't...
A walking, talking technical manual.
Who is also in love with him. I think you can sort of forgive that element of it, because although he did fall in love in a creepy way, but he didn't go out of his way to be a terrible person. He didn't even suggest that she would be the one who was the interface.
Well, no, imagine you played this the opposite way around. She turns up and he's deeply embarrassed by it. That would be acceptable.
Yeah.
But even when she finds his wank palace, he's fine with it. In fact, he tries to stop her from leaving until he's managed to explain to her why his deep fake of her is perfectly acceptable.
You have to watch it right to the end, then you'll understand.
You haven't even seen the bit where your top comes off yet.
I mean, at the end, she still hasn't seen the rest of the program, and she just kind of says, "Oh, it's fine. It's a bit of fun, isn't it? I can't believe I walked in on that. Your face, oh."
But the Geordie line here is, "I'm guilty of a terrible crime. I offered you friendship," and you just think, "Oh, have you just?" Yeah, it's just a bit men's rights, isn't it? It's, I gave you
Very
nothing
much so.
but compliments. I put on my casual clothes and invited you to my quarters, and it's just there was never any need for him to force that relationship on her, which she clearly didn't want to have. It was very much read the room, and whether she's married or not, it doesn't matter. That would have been inappropriate to do with anybody. So we're going to put that on your permanent record, and want to see you again in 3 weeks after your training.
That is bad enough, that scene where she's opened his private browser tab. But it's the fact that after she points out that he's been a creep and he can't accept it, we have a brief moment where he's made to sort of realise, oh, I might have been a bit of a dick by Guinan, but by the end of the episode, they're just laughing about it. Oh, it was fine. You remember your face.
And just because they come up with a scientific solution together, it's very unsatisfying, because at the end of it, do you know what? You shouldn't be left with that scene of, oh, maybe if she didn't have a husband. It should be left with, well, I'm glad we were able to work together, but I do think your behaviour was overall inappropriate here.
I'll be filing a complaint.
Just imagine that moment when Picard calls him into his office, and he has the complaint there. That would have been a really good scene, actually.
Geordie, I found these boxes of Kleenex on the holodeck. They're all surprisingly empty. Are we supposed to believe as well that he hasn't returned to that program since Booby Trap, and he's just left it at that moment? I mean, I got the impression at the end of Booby Trap, and bear in mind, I remember very little of Booby Trap. I got the impression at the end of that was not pausing the program; it was closing it and stopping it.
I think he sort of realised he shouldn't, because later on, remember, he was giving Barclay advice about not using the holodeck for fantasies, because, you know, I even had an incident in the holodeck, but I don't. Yeah, I just.
But that's a point, and it's something that I think you said yesterday, James, when we were all expressing our disgust before recording this. This episode kind of has been done already with Barclay in a not horrific way,
and it will get done perhaps better in Deep Space Nine, with the episode Meridian, in which an alien wants a holodeck fantasy of Major Kira, so Quark tries to get her accurate data, and he gets his comeuppance at the end, and that falls on the right side of the moral argument.
Well, certainly any time that I've watched Meridian TV, it's been very much an example of seeing people that look like they're from a different planet. Regional jokes there.
But yeah, they've fallen on the right side of the moral argument, either side of this episode. Do we think that it's Maurice Hurley that has done this, or should the likes of Michael Piller have stepped in and done a rewrite?
I'll be honest, I thought he was dead by this point.
So Jerry Taylor, she apparently did a rewrite on the Geordie Leah Brahms reunion, and Ron Moore did some work on the other side of it. So it has had a rewrite.
Christ.
Because it does seem like a season 2 episode.
Yeah.
It feels like a phase 2 episode.
It just gets a lot wrong, I think, and it's just not very comfortable for me to watch it. I would genuinely say, of every single episode of Star Trek, maybe apart from the ones that have been made in the last 3 years, this is my least favourite to watch, and I would never go back to it. If I was doing a rewatch, I would skip this one.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And it's the fact as well that awful plot is twinned with one that is so fundamentally depressing. I mean, slightly boring as well, but just incredibly depressing.
Let's talk about the space ravioli. So a life form that exists in space, which is a cool enough concept. It's been done other places as well, but I suppose we had Tin Man as well. That was horrible. But it's fine as a kind of a B plot sciencey thing. It's absolutely fine, but it is absolutely horrendous. And actually, I think the best part of this episode is Patrick Stewart's reaction to him killing a life form, and it's just the devastation of Captain Picard. It's
so tonally out of place with what's going on in the A plot. We go from this light men's rights activist comedy caper into you've orphaned a child there.
Well, no, he doesn't know there's a child yet.
I think that is part of the problem of the episode, though, isn't it? Because we've had something like First Contact, which does have strands, but it is very much one plot where what's going on the planet is the absolute focus of the episode. Whereas these are just two disparate elements happening at the same time. And I don't think it serves the episode particularly well, because they are tonally off. It is a really weird kind of thing. And I think they're trying to make that plot light-ish, the one with the, bringing up baby, it's on a starship, it's draining the power. I think there are elements where they're like, when they're calling it Junior, that's meant to be funny, maybe? But, yeah, that image of the creature turning to ash is just, it's very dark, it troubled me. As maybe it should if you're going to do the murder of a space whale.
Just not alongside the comedy "You Caught Me Wanking" episode. That's all. I mean that's kind of essentially doing what the bloody Lower Decks show is doing. The idea that while something serious is going on upstairs, Tasha Yar's been killed or whatever, downstairs there's some incident where someone set fire to the ready room with a toaster.
I mean, that is basically how Lower Deck started, because it came from the season 8 Star Trek Next Generation Twitter feed, which was basically every single tweet was Captain Picard must negotiate a treaty between the Klingons and the Romulans. Meanwhile, Data and Geordi invent a new way to replicate milkshakes.
I'm sure it will run for many seasons.
There's not much to it, though, is it? So, obviously, there's the death, and then there's the hope. Again, it's like, everyone's devastated, it's terrible, and it's like, oh, no, there's an energy reading. Oh, it was pregnant.
But that's the thing. That it should probably be the A-plot in an episode of its own, where it's tonally consistent, and that there are further repercussions for the actions that have taken place. But you're right. Once Junior's attached itself to the ship, from that point on, it's fairly standard Trek B plot. Something's happened to the ship. Ship's going to explode unless we do something soon. Here's an idea. Oh, we fixed it.
Yeah, it's exactly that. How do we get out of this ticking clock situation with some technobabble?
Whereas I think that does a real fundamental disservice to the idea that they're playing with. That setup should be more of an episode in the style of Measure of a Man. Frankly, it should be a philosophical debate and quandary about the necessity of defense and action and all of those elements.
And you want it in an episode written by Maurice Hurley.
But it could also be an environmental subtext. We've taken this life, and that has a massive impact on this area of space. This life form, basically, it distributes some kind of gas to this, which makes this planet. So basically, we've broken the Prime Directive by taking this life, because this planet will no longer gain an atmosphere due to the actions of this creature. You could do all sorts of things with it. It does feel slightly wasted on we've got to get the monster to the other monsters sort of plot, which actually comes out of nowhere as well. It's like, no one's ever seen a life form like this. Oh, they're actually everywhere. They're just, there's some in the asteroid belt.
This thing that was randomly floating in one direction must therefore have been going to this point. It makes sense. Space is forwards and backwards and not up and down. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
I've seen Wrath of Khan. I know that's not true.
But weren't you in tears when the CGI ravioli was flying away with its new parents?
I mean, if it's anything like nature, they probably ate it.
Well, ravioli is delicious.
But not carnivorous.
That's true.
Well, there's a plot for a future Star Trek project. Carnivorous ravioli. Genetically engineered due to an error with a replicator. Coming to you soon on Star Trek Lower Decks.
You can imagine that, can't you, on Lower Decks? Them just saying, "But my ravioli bit me."
I think to suggest that any imagination takes place is probably to inflate the situation.
I think this episode is what it is, and it's very much feels like a middle of the season script that they've picked up, which was clearly chucked in a bin at some point, and just tried to reshape it. Because it's not. I don't think it's bad, and it's bad in its message. It's not, and possibly in its execution, but otherwise it's great. The structure is fine. But maybe it's not even, because I've said that there's a unrelated A and B plot. So basically, I don't like this episode. I don't like its message. I don't like the character interactions, and I don't like the tonal shifts. 4 stars. I think we've said all we want to about that one, but we'll have some technical specifications in quickfire.
Quickfire.
So, Dr. Leia Brahms, when she's in engineering, finds the hologram file and says she'll run it on holodeck 3. Now, how does she know that holodeck 3 is available at that particular moment? Is she particularly familiar with the scheduling system? Does she know where holodeck 3 is in relation to engineering? I'm just... Oh my god, I've turned into Phil Farrand. What's happened to me?
Oh no, he's far more dull on this episode.
But... yeah, I just found that a really weird line of dialogue. Could she have said, "Can you set this up in the holodeck?" And she would have said, "I'll set it up on holodeck 3," and that's much better. But probably extra McExtra wasn't allowed any more lines.
They are in the middle of an emergency, so I think she just assumed that the holodecks wouldn't be full at that time.
I'm willing to bet that's not true.
That's what Maurice Hurley thought when he written that line.
It's fine. I was just nitpicking.
Well, I mean, if you'd like to know what Phil Farrand had to say on the episode, I realise like is subjective in this instance. It's kind of surprising, actually, in some regards. I mean, for an episode that deals with the plot this does, it's unsurprising that his favourite line of it is, "Was it good for you?"
Not a line you expect to hear in Star Trek.
No. But you'd kind of expect that this episode would generate some of the creepier instincts of the Nitpicker's Guide. But instead it's generated some of the duller ones. He's particularly incensed about one thing that's changed. He says... Great confusion surrounds this matter-antimatter ratio thing. When Brahms comes on board, she claims that the matter-antimatter ratio has been changed. She says that the mixture isn't as rich as Starfleet specs call for. Isn't there only one matter-antimatter ratio? Wesley and Mordog, while talking on Starfleet exam in Coming of Age, said that the ratio is 1-to-1, and that testing stations confirm this. Yet, in Where No One Has Gone Before, Picard says Kaczynski is coming on board to test the different intermix formulas, and the chief engineer in Skin of Evil talks about setting the ratio of matter and antimatter to 20-to-1. By the way, the authors of Star Trek The Next Generation Technical Manual once again make a valiant attempt to explain away these discrepancies by saying that the intermix ratios change depending on the warp factor. At warp 8 and anything above, they maintain the ratio is 1-to-1, but is different at lower speeds. However, that is not what Wesley and Mydock say when they finish questioning about the matter-antimatter ratios in Coming of Age. This exact dialogue is, once I realised it was a trick question, there was only one answer. The super intelligent Wesley Crusher comments, "This goes on. I haven't even finished the bullet point."
It's okay, I faded you out ages ago.
I didn't think I'd be saying this, but I think I would have almost preferred him to come out with something creepy in this instance.
This is the first appearance of the Jeffries tubes, of course named after Matt Jeffries, as they would appear throughout the run of the series. They had appeared in The Hunted before, but they looked completely different.
So I'm sure we're all wondering how the story continued with Leia Brahms following this episode. And thankfully, Memory Beta can help. So in many of the Star Trek novels that continued the story, they reveal that Leia Brahms' husband is killed in an accident following the theft of the Genesis device.
What?
That's the Genesis device from off of Wrath of Khan.
But the Genesis device they used it. It was done.
But evidently it was stolen, and then Leah Brahms survived an explosion, and her husband was killed. She would then go on to work with Scotty aboard the USS Challenger, and this is where Geordie and Brahms meet again. Brahms and Geordie begin a short-lived relationship on board the Enterprise E, but it doesn't last. However, they do resume their relationship, but it seems like this is while Geordie was seeing somebody else on the Enterprise E, so it sounds like he's cheating on his current girlfriends with Leah Brahms. So, yeah, they make him a bit creepy again there.
Why did they name a ship Challenger after a ship that exploded? Sorry, that was the thing that I was getting hung up on there.
And it's also revealed on Memory Beta that the aliens are called the Gekli.
Rick Berman remarked, "There's two great stories. First, that of the fantasy woman Geordie thinks he's met but didn't, and now he has to actually meet her, and the simultaneous story of the space baby latching onto the ship. They were two nice stories that worked well together." In contrast, Keith R.A. DeCandido, who is the writer for Tor.com, said, "They turned LaForge into an unrepentant virtual rapist." So, there's contrasting views.
There is a deleted scene which features Picard and Worf reciting a nursery rhyme. Now, I don't want to see this deleted scene because the fantasy will be so much better than the reality.
I hope you had as much fun listening to this as we did recording it. We'll be back once again with Night Terrors and also another episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. But for now, goodbye.
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 And whilst I was there on Memory Beta, I also came across this is not relevant to Galaxy's Child, but I think I have to talk about it. This is the opening paragraph of the summary of a Next Generation novel. This follows Star Trek Nemesis. Data returns to his home on Orion Prime to find both Lal and her companion, an Alice series android, missing. A message from Professor Moriarty reveals that he is responsible and offers to release them if Data can provide him and Countess Regina Bartholomew with physical bodies. That's an actual Star Trek The Next Generation novel called The Light Fantastic.
Still, it sounds better than Picard.
It genuinely does, unfortunately.